Hi guys, sorry about that, the wonders of modern technology. I'm here in my house during lockdown, and I thought it would be an awesome idea to chat to you on a weekly basis and to catch up with all things Pinoy. I've wanted to do this for a very long time, this Pusong Pinoy series. I started this probably around about 4 years ago, and I did a couple of episodes. I interviewed Fourth Impact, and then it kind of got shelved. So I'm very, very grateful to the team behind this. This is a weekly program. If you want to be a guest or take part in any way, please let me know. I've known my first guest for a very long time, Orion, and he's a great advocate for the Philippines, for the Filipino people, and of course, federalism. So I have a series of questions, and you guys can take part as well by joining us on Facebook and leaving your questions, and some of them will be screened as well. So without much further ado, I'd like to welcome Orion Perez. It's over to you, Orion. Please tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and your interests, etc.
On your show, Malcolm. So yeah, my name is Orion, guys, and I live in Singapore. I've been working here since the late 2000. So I'm essentially an OFW. I work in IT, and for a very long time, I've already been thinking that something's wrong with the system in the Philippines. I was essentially thinking originally, much longer than that, it's probably something to do with the leaders and all that. But then I realized if there's something wrong with the leaders all the time, or at least like there's some consistency in them not being able to do a lot of the things that they said they would, there's something wrong with the system. And I've been able to see all this in the countries I've visited, being here in Singapore, seeing how things work. I've thought I want the Philippines to have the same. And that's what made me turn into an advocate for reforms, particularly systemic reforms and constitutional reforms leading to federalism and other stuff such as the parliamentary system, and being much more open to foreign direct investors.
That's fantastic. So how long have you actually been away from the Philippines, and how often do you get the chance back home?
So I've been in Singapore since late 2000, but then there were times that I actually went back to the Philippines, and there was even a time that I was in China. I had a project, like a really long project in Malaysia, so I've kind of been around a bit. So I'd say it would be something like close to probably 17 or 16 years away from the country, because in between those almost 20 years, I've actually been back to the Philippines a few times. I mean, like living there again, and then I go to the Philippines very often, so at least twice, thrice, or 4 times a year.
Fantastic. And you've got family back home in the Philippines as well, have you, Orion?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my parents are actually there. I've got a sister who's there. I've got other sisters who are actually based in the US, but then one of them who's from the US, her family's right now in the Philippines. I mean, her husband works with US aid, and so they've been stationed in the Philippines. So they're quite happy there right now. They've my parents have an extra one of their offspring to actually be there with them as well. So yeah, I've got a lot of people in the Philippines, friends and family as well, still left there.
We seem to have a bit of a problem with the signal. It seems to be a bit choppy.
I did notice.
How am I coming through to you?
Yeah, there's a little bit of choppiness in terms of me hearing you, a little bit of that, but I'm hoping it would sort itself out.
Yeah, to settle down. So anyway, let's continue. So you're a great advocate for federalism, and of course you are passionate about the Philippine pride and everything else. I think that's to be commended. I'd like to ask you kind of exactly what federalism is, because some of our viewers may not understand fully about the implications of federalism and that kind of system. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about what it means and how it would benefit the Philippines?
Okay, so I think I'd like to show slide number 6 to show what the Philippines looks like. So when you know, so I have a little bit of visual aids there. Slide number 6 basically shows a photo of what the Philippines looks like at night from a satellite photo of the map, and you can see that there's like a lot of really like bright lights in the area of Metro Manila and the surrounding areas. It's very clear what's happening here. It's essentially you've got essentially Manila, Metro Manila, as the center of the Philippines in terms of economy and a lot of different things, and then any economic activity that's going on just right outside of that is really nothing but spillover. So you've got an over concentration in these areas, and it's just sad. It's just really sad that there's not that much going on in the rest of the country, which is also why people from the rest of the country are moving to Metro Manila to look for jobs. Now, if we were to look, for example, at let's look at number 5, slide number 5. There is a you can basically see Central Europe. There's Germany there, and then if you look at Germany, you can see a bit more of an even distribution of population. So it's not like there's only one area which is lit, but there's like several different areas that are lit, and so there's, yeah, you can see Berlin, and then you can see Hamburg, and you can see all these different places. There's one area, huge area, that's really several different cities, not one agglomeration, but like several different cities, but they're close to the Rhine River, so it's in Rhineland, and then you've got all these other places like Stuttgart and Munich. And so what happens is you can see that in the situation of Germany, which is using federalism, they have multiple centers, multiple main economic centers, rather than what happens in the Philippines or in countries like France. If you look at France, you can see that there's only Paris that's really lit up. So we want to move towards federalism so that we can have a more evenly spread out type of development, so that it's not only Metro Manila that is developing economically, but rather so many different cities. You know, each region or each province should at least have a major city that is cosmopolitan and has a lot of great job opportunities there, so that people in those areas don't have to leave and move to Metro Manila, and if they can't find jobs, become OFWs working abroad. So that's basically what it's all about in a nutshell. We want to have a means of distributing economic opportunities to the rest of the Philippines.
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
That's much better. All right, fantastic. There was just a little technical issue at my end. So how do you think the Philippines can kind of move forward? You know, one of my concerns was the OFWs. You know, the fact is that when Filipinos maybe are younger, they have this desire to go abroad, which you can kind of understand. But the thing that really, really worries me, and has always worried me, is the fact that many OFWs don't get to see their family for such a long time. Sometimes they leave their children when they're babies and don't get to see them till they graduate college. This is something that really concerns me, and I believe needs to change.
That's a really huge concern as well. In fact, and that's why I'm not only advocating for federalism alone, but that also includes the removal of foreign direct investment restrictions in the Constitution. So in case you're familiar with the 1987 Constitution, there were certain provisions, certain lines of text placed in, particularly in Article 12 of the Constitution, which basically tries to protect Filipinos from so-called encroachment from foreign investors, because the people who wrote that constitution didn't understand economics very well, and they thought that they were doing this to help protect the Filipinos from foreign invasion or something. What happened was they didn't allow foreign companies to come in and create jobs, and what happens, unfortunately, is there are not that many industrialists and major businessmen in the Philippines who can create enough jobs for everyone, which is essentially why people are forced to go abroad. And there's been a whole industry, educational industry, built all around that. You've got a lot of people studying to become nurses and allied medical professionals or caregivers, where essentially they've thought that's the only way for me to earn money, and so I'll study this course to be a caregiver or a nurse or an allied medical practitioner who would have to work abroad, far away, and send money back. And I really think that's not a very how do you say this, a very healthy means of building up the Philippines, because you end up having so many of these families which are pretty much separated in terms of distance, and sometimes the families really do break apart. So I mean, it's not a really sustainable model for economic development. That needs to change. And so those restrictions in the Constitution need to be removed so that we can have more jobs coming into the Philippines locally.
I think the sound is not so clear now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So
I hear
you. And I think one of the things that's always been the concern of mine, fantastic. One of the things that's always been the concern of mine are these colleges that spring up throughout the Philippines, or even these kind of ad hoc caregiver courses. And people have this dream, Filipinos have this dream that once they've gone on this caregiver course, they can immediately get a job abroad. And of course in the UK, but of course it's incredibly difficult for Pinoys to come over here. And I think what's happening is a lot of OFWs are investing so much money in these caregiver courses in the hope that their relatives can come over here. And in fact, they can't. I think there needs to be a concerted effort to promote this message and maybe help people to understand, that it's not so easy to come abroad, because my worry is so many Filipinos are actually getting scammed almost on a daily basis by these fake promises of jobs.
Indeed, one of the biggest concerns, really. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible that this is the way certain families majority of families in the rural areas of the Philippines actually live. You'd notice that in most of the provinces and the rural areas, almost all households have at least one person working abroad, sending money back. And it's really bad when you think about it, because it's like, so this is the only way we're actually able to pay for anything. People are able to buy things from the malls because they've got someone or two or three people abroad sending money back. And these people are actually not earning really huge amounts of money. They're earning, what they're actually earning is really small amounts of money in the countries where they are. It just so happens that that money, when translated into the Philippine setting, is considered big, but in reality, it's really not that big either. So I think this really needs to change. People need to see that there's another way of doing things, and that is, let's bring investors to come in. This is something that other countries that are very, very successful have done. Singapore has done this. Malaysia has done this. Indonesia is currently doing it. Vietnam is currently doing it. Thailand has been doing it. So many other countries, even Ireland did the same. That's the reason why Ireland, when they developed, they ended up being called the Celtic Tiger, because their growth patterns were very similar to that of Singapore, which was they were being very open to allowing foreign investors to come in. And by the way, Ireland is very much like the Philippines. I know, Malcolm, you've got an Irish surname, but you know, I was going to say, Ireland is very similar to the Philippines in the sense that they've also been very much.
Yes, my father's Irish.
You know, the way it works in Ireland was that they were very much like the Philippines, and having to send people abroad, the economy was for many decades, even centuries, based on sending people to work abroad and send money back, and that changed when they later on decided, let's bring in foreign investors to come in. They started having all these American companies bringing in their a lot of outsourcing as well into Ireland, and then now Ireland actually has one of the strongest economies in the world, in fact, and it's very much similar to what Singapore did, similar to what other countries are doing, and I think the Philippines must learn from that, because we're so similar to Ireland. I mean, we've culturally, I mean, it's a very Catholic countries background sort of thing, and they got a lot of similarities in terms of the, I don't know, it's just the way people act is very, very similar, and whatever flaws they have, we have too. So I think I can say that if it worked in Ireland, it's going to work in the Philippines, and it worked as well in so many other countries in the area, you know, in Singapore and Malaysia and all these other countries. So there's no harm in us doing this. Let's be more open to investors, and we can have more jobs, so people don't have to go far away from the families just to be able to send money back. Yeah, over to you, Malcolm.
Of course. So experience sort of problems. I think it might be my Wi-Fi connection. Now, can you still hear me?
Loud and clear. No problem at all.
Okay, right. Just checking out. I'm sure you guys can still hear me. So I wanted to know, basically, one of the fantastic initiatives of this government, which I'm really pleased about, is this Back to the Province scheme. Is that Balik Provinciano? And it basically means that they're encouraging people to go back to provinces. And of course, at the moment with COVID-19 and everything else, of course, there's a real lack of jobs back home, because of course, once the industry shut down, the entertainment industries shut down, people can't go to live events like conferences, whatever it may be. So of course, there's a big sort of surge of unemployment. That's nobody's fault. It's happening here in the UK. It's happening around the world. But the government has this great initiative almost to reduce the pressure on Manila and to get people to go back to the provinces. I think that's a great move. Why do you think they're doing that? And you say about that as well.
So yeah, what's happening is Balik Provincia is actually a kind of like, it's meant to be something that would lead us closer towards the eventual implementation of federalism. So I mean, we want people to go back to their hometowns and all that, so that we decongest Metro Manila. One of the things that caused that to happen was during the COVID-19 crisis caused the need for the enhanced community quarantine. So the enhanced community quarantine was done by the Department of the Interior and Local Government, so the DILG, and so they were the ones entrusted with implementing this and enforcing it and making sure people stayed at home. But then one of the problems they noticed was that there were so many people who didn't stay home. They were staying under bridges and under shady trees or whatever. You know, they were basically outside of their homes, and they were asked, "What are you doing here? Why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be at home." And they said, "Well, I'm sorry, but we don't have space at home because there's like 10 of us in a really, really small, cramped room. So it's just there's no way for us to do social distancing when we're so cramped." And so, this is one of the things they notice, that there's so many of these families that are living in really cramped conditions in overcrowded, congested areas. And that's the reason why they realized, I think it makes good sense to find a way to get people to go back home to their hometowns, especially because right now there's no jobs anyway in Metro Manila. So might as well send them back to where they're supposed to be, so that social distancing and the quarantines that need to happen can happen much more easily. And this is a prelude to being able to have federalism, where we lessen the number of people in Metro Manila, so they go back to where they're supposed to be. Obviously, there's going to be a clamor for job creation in the provinces, and also that's the key reason for why the DILG is really also trying to spearhead the reforms that would make Balik Probinsya work. So things like getting rid of those 60-40 anti-foreign direct investment restrictions. The DILG is also doing that together with Balik Probinsya, because they're saying, we can't just send people back home. We also need to make sure that they will have jobs when they're there. And those jobs can happen only when there are lots of investors coming in. And the fastest way to have investors coming in is to basically remove those restrictions that prevent foreign direct investors from coming into the Philippines. And that's really what it is. It's COVID-19 essentially exposed a rotten system. It exposed a system that was not working. It's not that it destroyed the system. The system was already destroyed. It was already flawed. And all it did was to expose these flaws. And so now it's become much more urgent that these things get fixed. Over to you, Malcolm.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you very much for that. Right now to a short break. So we'll see you guys in a few minutes. Thanks so much for watching. Maraming salamat po. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon for more of a Pusong Pinoy. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me. It's a real pleasure to have my guest Orion Perez here today. I'd like to greet all of our followers on Facebook and everybody who's watching this important discussion really on federalism. So I'd like to ask Orion some more questions. Are you there, Orion?
I'm here, yep. I'm here, yep.
Fantastic. So you're brilliant, fantastic. You know, I've always had a great concern about the traffic in Manila. I know obviously during the time of lockdown, obviously there's been a lot less traffic. But if you go back to the traffic that we normally see when people are queuing up for hours just to get to their destinations, I know whenever I go back home, I allow like 3 hours to get to like a simple meeting where it might take 20 minutes normally. This is one of the biggest issues I think that maybe would have businesses and need to be really urgently addressed. Is this something that's happening at the moment? Do you have any suggestions on how you can deal with the traffic problem, which of course is a really big problem?
Well, that's partly what that's partly what Balik Probinsya is supposed to be doing as well. So trying to bring people back to their provinces, but at the same time, it's also partly what federalism really aims to achieve. So once you start to have federalism and you can get the provinces and the regions to basically develop themselves economically, then there's going to be less of a reason for people in the regions to leave and go to Metro Manila. And more importantly, there's a key incentive for people who are already suffering from the terrible traffic situation in Metro Manila to go back to their home provinces, which will also at that point in time start to have better opportunities. So I think one thing that I would really like to suggest to the government is that they also spearhead certain like relocation schemes where they can basically say, they should provide major tax breaks to huge companies to say, look, if you guys are going to shift your operations to far away, up north or down south, far away, I mean, not connected to Metro Manila, but something like really far away, somewhere in Mindanao, or maybe somewhere in Pangasinan or in Ilocos region, that sort of thing, very far away, so that you don't end up having the so-called spillover effect. What's going to happen is you're going to be able to create, you're going to be able to decongest Metro Manila as these companies move to faraway places and they relocate their workers and employees along with them. So I think that's one of the things they need to do. That's very, very important so that federalism can happen as well. Or at least if we don't get federalism to happen before, to start at least, to begin, by the time this particular administration ends, at least we could do a jump starting of getting these companies to move, and then maybe in the next next administration, then we can go with federalism. The thing is, this relocation of companies needs to happen, and federalism is really part of that as well. Over to you, Malcolm.
And of course, what's the good thing is that actually, yeah. So what I think is one of the positive things about what you're saying is it creates employment opportunity in other areas of the Philippines as well, because many times people have said it's Imperial Manila, i.e. everything happens in Manila, all the money's there, the investment is there, and the business is there. I think what would be really good, rather than obviously people traveling from the province to Manila, which is why you've got this overcrowding, I think if the businesses were to set up in other areas, I think this would benefit local people as well, because it does seem to be the case right now that a lot of the money, the skyscrapers and everything is in Manila. But if you go provincially, maybe that's not always the case. So I think this is very positive. In fact, I was invited to the Senate when I went home last December, and I saw Aimee Marcos, and she was discussing that very same issue. And she was talking about the tax breaks, everything else, because obviously she's been a senator for a long time, so she knows the history. And I think this is something that she's definitely pressing for as well.
Indeed, it's good to know that there are people within the legislature themselves, including Aimee and others, who are actually supportive of this, because there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation going on among some people in politics or in the legislature as well. They don't even understand what this is all about, so they go against it. It's funny. For example, there's a senator, Franklin Drillon, who's very much known to be part of the opposition, and he's now saying, "Oh yeah, we need to bring in the foreign investors who are leaving China, and you know, we should get them to come to the Philippines." And I'm basically saying, well, look, Mr. Drillon, now's the time for you to start agreeing with and cooperating with the administration in allowing the removal of these restrictions that prevent foreign investors from coming in, as well as having federalism come in. Because with federalism, we'd be able to more easily offer cheaper land rentals to these companies that want to set up factories. They can basically not have to pay the same price of rental in Metro Manila. So I mean, it's going to be a lot easier for them in the provinces. That's why these reforms are really, really necessary. But people like him, people like Drillon, they actually need to cooperate and agree with these particular reforms, rather than going against it. That is. Over to you, Malcolm.
Yeah. So yeah, I think maybe some understand what would exactly be issues behind it, because I know there's already been a panel set up by the government, and some people have not really kind of come up with the right ideas. I think it's very, very important that maybe even yourself, maybe people need to have these regular sort of forums, if you like, to understand what federalism actually means, and find a better solution. Because I think some people still want to hang on to the past, and I think that the Philippines does need to move forward. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert on the Philippines, and some would argue that maybe I don't live in the Philippines and it's nothing to do with me. But I really do want to see opportunities for the Filipino people, and I want to see the Philippines prosper and move forward.
Indeed, indeed. That, you know, the consensus within the ASEAN, the Southeast Asia region, is that the Philippines, if we actually only got our act together and got the right systems in place, got the right reforms in place, we would be formidable. We would actually be, because I mean, like here in Singapore, Singapore's leaders actually consider the Filipinos to be among the most talented in this region. And so there's really no reason for us to continue to be left behind. We just need to have the right systems. I mean, in terms of the people, we do have the right people. We do have the right people. They just need to be able to have the ability to get into the right positions. And we're not going to have that if we continue to stick to the old system, which favors popularity and celebrity status over competence. So what we really need is a systemic change that will allow the best possible people to arrive at these positions where they can make the most change. So that's really what it is.
Thanks. Yeah, you know, it's I think maybe we do need like sort of regular road shows. You know, it was fantastic when you came over, I believe it was last year, and you were able to hold these federalism road shows all over the UK, because I think it's a really good opportunity of explaining to people exactly what it is. But wouldn't it be great if you could do that maybe locally in the Philippines? Do you have any plans to run any kind of road shows or any kind of initiatives back home in the Philippines? Because you have an excellent way of explaining everything, and I think it's because you're from IT background and the way you think about federalism. I know I watched your presentation, which I found very, very useful, which is why I really wanted to get you on our show today. But would you like to go back home to the Philippines and maybe present this here, there too?
Yes, I'd be actually interested to do it. I'm very, very much open, as long as they pay for my airfare and lodgings, whatever, and also make sure that I I have enough time to tell my boss that I'm going to be away for this X number of days or something like that, or have some of these happening during the weekends, or something like that. I mean, I'm very much open to it. Now, if that's a little too hard to do because of all the logistics of traveling and all that, we can always have these types of online webinars, and I think it works actually. I think I've been making a lot of these videos which people can actually watch. We have a website, correctphilippines.org. People can learn about federalism and all the other reforms from there as well. And then, I do. My team and I, the other members of the Correct movement, we actually hold a lot of, like, weekly. There's always some 1 or 2 or 3 webinars happening, and these are forums that people can actually attend and learn from. So, I mean, at the moment, it's really hard to do the actual physical roadshow because, I mean, we've got the whole COVID-19 thing. So I guess webinars really is the way to go at the moment. And that's kind of what's happening. We're doing this, for example, with the intention of reaching people in the Philippines so that they get to understand these. And I do a lot of these kinds of things in Tagalog as well, and also in Cebuano. So really, I mean, I think and I have other members in my team who are doing it in their own native languages as well, so that we can spread the word much more to a wider base of people.
You mentioned COVID-19. Now, of course, COVID lifetime, it's a terrible pandemic that's really affected the lives of every single family around the world, back home in the Philippines, but of course in the UK and everywhere else. And I've been very, very upset and distressed to hear about the number of Filipino nurses, and in fact all nationalities, but as we're talking about the Philippines, let's talk about Filipino nurses who have very sadly, tragically lost their lives in the fight against COVID-19. There was a time where the Philippine government were actually banning Philippine nurses going abroad, and this was only really to take their safety. But this brings me on to a general point, and that's that at the moment the Philippines seems to be suffering from this brain drain, and particularly our nurses, medical professionals. They spend 3 years, 4 years at college, and then after a year or so they go abroad. It's not that they want to, it's they're forced to, because of course what they want to do is to support their families back home in the Philippines. You can fully understand that, but sadly we have the situation where some Filipino nurses actually go on to the call center industry, to other industries, and I think that's very sad. How do you think we can retain, or the Philippines can retain, more of its nurses, which of course are essential to the country? I guess better pay would help from some of the private hospitals. I know that you'll pay millions of pesos for an operation and the nurses are getting £200 a month. How would you like to see things move forward, and why do you think this is important?
Well, so we were talking about some of these reforms, right? And really, if for example, we were able to get rid of those 60-40 and other anti-foreign direct investment restrictions that prevent these companies from coming in and creating jobs for Filipinos, if we were able to push through with those reforms, then we'd have so many companies from abroad coming into the Philippines, taking advantage of the fact that Filipinos do speak good English, especially compared to the rest of the countries in the ASEAN Southeast Asia region. So they'd all come to the Philippines, create jobs. People would have jobs. People would now have money to pay. There'd be more money circulating in the Philippines, and therefore there'd be much more wealth created, so that the healthcare system in the Philippines will be able to pay better wages to the nurses. And then when that happens, we can also start to make the Philippines become a major medical hub for medical tourism. And it's really sad, honestly, it's really sad that despite the Philippines being good with English and being Western oriented, we have not really taken advantage of that ability, and we've been overtaken by Thailand. And Thailand has much greater mind share amongst Westerners when it comes to thinking about, I'd like to go have a checkup or whatever, you know, some operation which I feel is going to be cheaper. They go to Thailand for that rather than the Philippines. They should instead be coming to the Philippines, but we don't have a very good economic system that can support high quality, you know, medical centers everywhere. So because of this, you know, you've got the best hospitals actually somewhere else, and not in the Philippines, and therefore we don't really have a good system in terms of being able to pay our medical practitioners, including the nurses, even the doctors. We're not able to pay them that well. Because of that, people really are forced to leave. But that would change. That would change if we allow foreign investors to come in, if we make the major constitutional reforms that would get rid of those restrictions that prevent investors from coming into the Philippines. When we do that, the economy improves and the healthcare industry improves as well. Over to you, Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. It's something that's of a great concern to me, and I know that other countries, as you say, have overtaken the Philippines in terms of medical tourism. I know India does that a lot, and there are other countries as well. You know, it's been great chatting to you, and I think we should pause now for a 2-minute break, and then after we come back, we're actually going to be answering some of your questions. A lot of people have been posting comments on Facebook, and we're going to be tackling some of those when we come back. Thanks so much for watching Pusong Pinoy, and see you in a couple of minutes. Thanks so much for joining me again. I'd like to give so many people a shout out and thank you all for watching. You know, it's absolutely incredible. I'm very, very grateful. As I said, every week we're going to be featuring guests from around the globe. And yeah, this is a great opportunity. We have a message from Gabrielle Lim, who I believe is part of the Correct initiative. We need more OFWs to support the push for constitutional reforms so they can go home already and work in the country instead of abroad. Yeah, that's definitely right. You know, it does seem to be the case that it's almost this life ambition at the moment for Pinoys when they're young. Their life ambition is to go abroad. And I think one of the previous presidents mentioned this, that she'd like to see a day when leaving the Philippines becomes a choice and not a necessity, which it is now. And of course, I know the Philippines, the GDP of the Philippines due to remittances, I believe is running at about 6 or 7%. And there is some argument to say that that's being kind of relied upon in terms of helping the country, which is a good thing. But on the other thing, as I said to you earlier on, my biggest issue is that young people leaving the Philippines, going abroad and not seeing their families or their elderly. And even right now during the pandemic, tragically, there's been some parents who've actually passed away in the Philippines, and actually their children are still working abroad and can't get to see them. And this is tragic, and it really does need to stop. Would you agree, Orion? I'm sure you do.
I totally do. This is one of the things that actually motivates me. I mean, the whole idea that I see people who, work in Singapore for so many years, and they're just sending money back, but they've never really been with their children. They've never been with their families, and in many cases, their families are actually broken as well. I mean, it's really tragic, and I've seen so much of it. That's part of the thing that actually motivates me to push for these reforms. I hate seeing this happening over and over again.
Okay, and Jonathan Winter sent us a message as well. Not too sure if Ireland really has a strong economy. Cost of housing is very expensive, which is causing many people to struggle there to buy properties. I think you make a good point, Jonathan. I don't really know Ireland personally, although I'm half Irish. I've only been there once or twice. But what I would say is we're experiencing the same thing in the UK. A lot of Filipinos have this dream, this dream to go abroad, and they think that life is going to be amazing when people travel to the UK or to Ireland and other countries. And the reality of it is that things are very, very expensive over here. We pay council tax, we pay rent, we pay health. Nurses over here would have to pay a health surcharge. They pay road tax. They even pay for a TV license. And say life abroad is not really all it's cracked up to be. And I wonder if there's some way that message could be sent across to our schools in the Philippines, in that maybe going abroad, of course you can have a better life, I accept that. And of course you can send money back home to your family in the Philippines, which is a better life. But, we're struggling over here. And I think that message needs to be got across to people back home in the Philippines. And Lawrence says, people want the Philippine government to subsidize many things, but fail to realize that with very few FDIs operating the country, there's just not enough funds for that to be done. And that's exactly right. That's a very important point, in that the Philippines does need, I guess, more people to be paying taxes and more money to be coming into the country. But that would only happen where businesses are being opened out. Right now, with this 60-40 system, it means that if a foreign business wants to set up in the Philippines, of course, they can't do that without a Philippine partner, if you like. And that means that it is kind of, I guess, quite restrictive. And I think as soon as that's been dealt with, and maybe that's not the case anymore. I look at it this way. I live here in the UK, and I do think it's rather sad that other countries are buying up all our properties and buying up all of our land and everything else. And I agree with that either, but I think there does need to be improvement in this area. But I wouldn't want to see a case that foreign companies were coming into the Philippines and buying loads of land. No, I don't want to see that. I just think it wants to be a more level playing field, and I think there needs to be more opportunities.
Yeah, I did want to butt in a bit about the Ireland issue that Jonathan Winter was actually saying. So the truth is, Ireland does have a strong economy when you're talking about GDP per capita, both in terms of the nominal and the PPP. The PPP is purchasing price parity. So I'm just looking at it from that perspective. Yes, it's true that housing is really expensive, and it is expensive in many first world countries. But then Irish people who do go abroad, especially if they come to the Philippines, that whatever money they have, whatever money they make, goes a really, really, really long way. And that's considering that Ireland was way, 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 way poorer than the UK long ago, which is kind of why a lot of people from Ireland had to move to the UK or to the Commonwealth colonies. So if we were to look, for example, at the GDP, the gross domestic product for different companies in terms of different countries, in terms of ranking, Ireland, in terms of the 2019 estimates, is at number 4. You've got Luxembourg. This is the IMF. We're talking about IMF here. So we've got Luxembourg, then Switzerland, then Macau, then Norway, and then, Macau is not a country, but then number 4 among the countries is Ireland. So they've got a really, really high GDP per capita, and they are way, way stronger than that of the UK. So Ireland's GDP per capita is $77,771 per year. All right, per year, per person per year, whereas the UK, which is the old colonial master of Ireland, it's 41,030 US dollars per person per year. So that, you can see the UK is at number 21, Ireland is at number 4. So yes, it's true that maybe things are a bit expensive in Ireland. That's true. It's true in the UK as well, and so many other places. But comparatively speaking, they do have a functioning economy. It's way, way better than the Philippines was. Obviously, if they probably did things in a way that Singapore did, then probably it's going to be okay. I mean, like, Singapore has a means of, there's something that Singapore does so that things don't become too expensive. All right, maybe that's something that Ireland needs to learn from Singapore. But indeed, Ireland is actually considered to be a strong economy. It is, in fact, the strongest economy amongst the English-speaking countries of the world, even stronger in terms of GDP per capita, stronger than the United States of America. So we're just talking about these rankings. But of course, I mean, yes, if you're there and you feel that a lot of things are expensive, I mean, who am I to actually go against that, right? But this is just a comparison of data. Over to.
Thanks very much for answering that. So we have another question here, and maybe Orion, maybe you can take some of these questions. Colonial past might be one of the coherent factors to the similarity of Irish and Filipino social behavior. What can you say about that?
So I think it's partly a similar Catholic background. I think. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very much. I think a lot of it is similar majority Catholic background, and then a lot of other stuff is just coincidental. I mean, the Filipinos have duende, those little dwarves. The Irish have the leprechauns. We have the aswang, and Ireland has the banshees. I mean, these are coincidental stuff, but there's a lot of there's all these stereotypes about Irish people and Filipino people that actually is very, very similar. I'm not sure if it's really colonial. Maybe the colonial experience may have something to do with it. I don't know. It's just some coincidental thing, and I honestly believe that the Philippines should actually try to cultivate more ties with Ireland as well. Because really, there's just so much similarity. There's so much that we can learn from each other. Really, that's what I think.
Do you think also, I'm a big supporter of everyone's race and their belief, and I believe that everyone has their own right to what they believe in. But do you think possibly that I don't want to start criticizing the church, but do you think possibly that the Catholic Church has a big influence in the Philippines, and do you think that might be one of the issues. You know, again, I'm not bashing the church or anything like that, but I think maybe religion and sort of politics and it needs to be kept separate, which is what we have here in the UK. Although the Queen is the head of state, you know, there's no kind of combination, and I don't know what you can say about that, but maybe that's one of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that there is a bit of a negative influence in terms of the way the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, the CBCP, does what it does. It's really sad, because the CBCP is one of the villains in vilifying constitutional reform and federalism. They are among, especially there's this guy, his name is Bishop Broderick Pabilio, and I think he's the most notorious among those who are going against these reforms. These are reforms that could have helped the poor. I mean, I don't understand why you have people like him, who are supposed to be helping the poor, going against the very reforms that could have enriched their lives, improved their lives, giving them jobs, and not forcing them to go to Metro Manila or move abroad, but being able to have jobs in their little parishes, wherever they are. I don't understand why, but it is indeed partly the church, but also I think it's just that the guys running the church in the Philippines are a bit more archaic minded. They haven't gone with the times with how things are supposed to be. They're still stuck in the medieval ages, and a lot of them are grossly misinformed about federalism and all these other reforms. I mean, these are things that could have helped people. They, among all the others, should actually be helping to promote these reforms, because these are aimed at improving people's lives, but they're going against it. So unfortunately, yeah, they are a negative influence.
Do you think people are just perhaps scared of change? You know, things have been the same way in the Philippines for a very long time now. And I think people maybe don't want change. You know, people are happy with the system maybe, and until they actually see a change in practice. You know, it's the Filipinos who've gone abroad, maybe they experience other systems, maybe they're the ones who've seen what the changes are like. And of course, there are a lot of people who support federalism, but I think maybe that's one of the issues to overcome. People are comfortable in the life that they have already. Maybe the church, maybe other organizations are comfortable with how things are in the Philippines, and maybe don't really want change. Maybe they're scared of change. What can you say to these people?
Yeah, a lot of it is them being blind and callous and totally unsympathetic to the plight of the normal people. So these are people who are living a life of privilege. They are the ones in power. They are the ones in positions in which they are currently benefiting from the current status quo. They have no idea as to what ordinary people are going through. They have absolutely no contact with people from these kinds of backgrounds. So they're totally shut off and cut off from these kinds of things. So they don't know anything about it. So they don't get to hear anything about how people are suffering and all that. They have this cocoon, this force field, where notice how they live. They live in these gated communities, and then they're basically walled in and totally oblivious of the fact that people just outside of where they're living are living in squalor and poverty, whilst they actually live in a very privileged background. They don't want to change because, yes, they're so used to how things are, and they're just totally ignorant of what things are, what's actually happening outside. I think that I think what needs to happen is the reality needs to be pushed into their faces so that they can see what the ill effects are. They need to be reminded that if they don't allow these changes to happen, then what's going to happen at some point is there might be some kind of uprising wherein they are going to be the unfortunate victims, where people will be so angry at them, and that, you know, they think they're protected inside their walled, gated communities, but then and they think that they're protected by their private armies of security guards, that they are protected by their maids, their drivers, and they forget that the security guards, the maids, the drivers, the cooks, the gardeners are all people from the poor, that these people also actually live in squatter areas outside or in poverty-stricken areas back in the provinces. They need to understand this, because once, I mean, like if the places like Forbes Park, which is like for all these really posh people in Metro Manila and Dasmariñas as well, they think they're actually safe. But just outside of these are poverty-stricken areas, right outside of Forbes Park. There's this Pembo, Sembo, Rembo, Comembo, all these little communities that are generally poor. And there's, I mean, the people there, if they've had enough of this, they might just scale the walls and attack the people living in the gated posh communities. They need to understand this. The posh people need to understand this, that it's in their best interest that they make these reforms happen, because if they don't, at some point in time, when everything boils and people get so angry, it's not going to be some gradual thing that happens. People are just going to run amok. People are going to really get so angry, and there might just be a massacre. We don't want that to happen. They need to understand that if they don't do anything to improve people's lives with these reforms, they could actually suffer from this. That's what I had to say about that.
Yeah, I completely. You know, I'm really grateful to your time and what you've said, and, you know, your contribution, Orion. You know, we're both really, really supportive of change, and we believe this is the best way forward. You know, as I said, some of my bashers might say that I'm not Filipino, but I generally do love the country. You know, I've been back home more than 50 times over a period of close to 30 years, you know, and I have seen how things have been in the past, and I have seen how things are. And I have to say, I think there have been already some great changes and some great improvements in the country, but it can only go forward. So I have a couple more questions for you. And the first one is, where do you see the Philippines in 20 years from now? Or where would you like to see the Philippines in 20 years from now?
I would love to see the Philippines become a really, really progressive country 20 years from now, if we're able to get these reforms in place either next year or the year after, or at least within the next 4 years. If we can get these reforms in place, so that means getting rid of the 60-40 foreign direct investment restrictions, get rid of those. If we can evolve towards federalism and get in a parliamentary system, if we can get these within the next 4 years, at least get the ball rolling, you know, so that they get started. In 20 years, we would be an unstoppable economic development miracle. That's what would happen. So your question is really very much a conditional one, and at least my answer to that is very conditional and contingent upon whether we are able to get these reforms in place. If we don't get these reforms in place, the Philippines will, probably move up a little bit, but really, really slowly, right? And we'd be at the bottom of the heap. Other countries that are currently trailing the Philippines, like Cambodia and Myanmar, will probably in 20 years, if we don't reform what needs to be reformed, they'll probably have overtaken us already by then. So I don't want to see that. I want to see us at the top of the heap, because that's where we belong. We've got all the advantages, so that we should actually be the ones on top. That's one of the things that the leaders of Singapore, there's the Prime Minister himself, Lee Hsien Loong, and his former Deputy Prime Minister, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, they both said that Filipinos are among the most talented people, if not in the region, also the world, he said. They both said. And there's no reason why the Philippines can't be among the top performing countries in the region or in the world. And I totally believe that, and I totally agree with that. We just need to get the reforms in place. It's like, you know, we're like driving a car where we're stepping on the accelerator, on the petrol pedal, and we've got the handbrake on. So we need to find a way to get rid of that handbrake so that we can zoom full speed ahead. And that's what the reforms will do. Over to you, Malcolm.
I completely agree, but I know you concede, I know you accept that the Philippines is definitely going in the right direction, of course, and Filipinos are doing some amazing things. You know, we have some very, very clever people who are coming up with amazing inventions and going abroad and, you know, creating businesses, creating opportunities. But it would be nice to see some OFWs actually find a way or an incentive to go back home as well. Because again, it's part of this brain drain, isn't it? That we're losing some of the most talented people, which is kind of a shame. It's lovely that the Philippines and Filipinos are supporting other countries, and I think that's really admirable. But I'm hoping there'll be one day that actually the Philippines can grow with the help of such amazing, talented people, and we can only hope and dream. But also, what you're doing is very, very important in that you're spreading this message and driving this message forward. My final question before we do some shout outs, you know, there have been so many messages, is who would you like to see as the next and 17th president of the Republic of the Philippines, and why? And it might be a controversial question, you know, but yeah, let's go ahead and let's just ask that. Who would you like to see?
Yeah, so to be absolutely honest, this is really much. I would say that this really depends on who will be considered to be the official anointed successor of the current president. So the current president, Rodrigo Duterte, I believe, is doing a really great job. He's fixed a lot of things. He's improved a lot of things, and getting the right reforms in place was one of his main campaign promises, and he's really trying to get these in place. It's just that there's so many stubborn people going against it. So my point is, I want to make sure that in case he's not able to fully implement these reforms, that there will be some continuity so that whoever is the anointed successor to him will be the one to ensure that these reforms that were not completed, or hopefully not, but did not get to happen, will get to happen under that second term. Because I mean, we really need that momentum. We need that continuity to happen. Whatever was being started now needs to continue, and it can only continue if we have a veritable successor who is committed to the same vision as Rodrigo Duterte, you know, basically taking over from him. So it has to be whoever he anoints. And the fact is, we don't really know who that is yet, right? We don't really know who that is yet. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. And more importantly, waiting for us to be able to change the system right now so that we won't have a presidential system. And instead, we'd be caring more about who's going to be the next prime minister. So that's really what I was hoping for.
I knew you would actually say that, and I think that's a really good answer. You know, we're hoping one day for a system, maybe a parliamentary system, or a system maybe President Duterte could continue in some kind of prime minister role or kind of governor role, if you like. Maybe that's the way to go forward. But anyway, it's been fantastic speaking to you, and I really do appreciate this opportunity. I'd like to send my greetings to all of our listeners. Thank you so much. I'd like to send my special thanks to Kabay and Remit. Thank you very much for sponsoring these first few episodes. This has been our pilot episode. I would like to say personally that I'd like to apologize maybe if the tech hasn't been quite right from my end, you know, my Wi-Fi signal. I need to sort that out. But of course, during the lockdown, during COVID-19, you know, the broadband provider wasn't even open today. So there's a couple of things that we need to manage. But again, I think it was an excellent start. I would really welcome your feedback. I'd really welcome your comments, and any way that you feel that we can improve and get this better, because we hope this will be a weekly episode that will really benefit the Filipino people. And if we can raise issues like topical issues, if there are any concerns, we'd like to cover those as well. So yeah, just thanks so much to everyone for watching. I'd like to once again greet all of my listeners. There's been so much interactivity. I'd wish I could spend so much time reading all of these comments, but I'd like to thank Lawrence. I'd like to thank Heads. I'd like to thank all of you guys, Raul, and everyone who's been supporting. I'd like to thank all you guys from the Correct Movement. I'd like to thank you so much for your support and for everyone who supported this initiative. And, you know, it's been such a real pleasure and honor to have you as part of our first pilot episode. I'm so grateful. So yeah, I'd just like to, in closing, like to greet everyone in the Philippines. You know, thank you so much. Maraming salamat. You know, I'm trying to speak some Tagalog. I'm not great, but again, truly from the bottom of my heart, I do feel proud to be connected with the Philippines and a lover of the Philippines. It's such an honor to have a Filipino family. I'd like to thank you guys for everything. I'd like to say hi to Don, keep safe. Thank you so much. And to John, Clarence, Agula Gomez, good night. Maraming salamat po. Thank you for watching. And of course, Mabuhay Pilipinas. Would you like to send any final messages, Orion, to all of your listeners?
Yes, guys. Malcolm, I just wanted to thank you as well for having me here for the very first broadcast. And to all the people listening today, I just really wanted to say thank you very much for putting up with us and, you know, the tech problems and all that. So I wanted to encourage all of you to please take the time to visit the Correct Movement webpage. So that's correctphilippines.org, O-R-G. correctphilippines.org. So I've basically set up a website which serves as a central repository of information about federalism, about the parliamentary system, about being open to foreign direct investors. This is a place that you can use to do your research. And I know a lot of people, a lot of students have actually thanked me for providing that page because they've been using that as one of their one of the places they go to understand all these systems. And by the way, the thing about the website is we are backed by PhD professor academic research. So it's not, we're not just making things up. We're getting stuff that is based on real academic research. So I hope more and more people read up about it. You visit the website, correctphilippines.org. And spread the word, spread the articles that you see, spread the videos that you see from the Correct Movement Facebook page. And once again, I wanted to thank Malcolm again for having me on his show. Thanks, Malcolm.
Thanks so much. Thanks again to everybody. We'd like to leave it just there now, but if you're welcome to message me, if you'd like to also feature on the show, if there's any way you'd like to send out any messages to anybody or greet anybody, then please let me know and we can do that in our next episode. Maraming salamat po, Orion. Stay safe during lockdown and of course COVID-19, and thank you to everybody involved. Thank you.